What if I told you that right now, as you watch this, the Middle East is standing on the edge of a nuclear transformation unlike anything since the Cold War? What if I told you that three of the most bitter enemies on earth, Iran, Israel, and Saudi Arabia, are quietly, ruthlessly, and perhaps inevitably locking themselves into a new nuclear triangle? A triangle that could decide not just the fate of the region, but the future of global peace itself. Because tonight, in this story, the shadows of old wars are merging with the glow of nuclear ambition. And the question is no longer if the Middle East goes nuclear, it's when. Let's begin with what everyone's talking about, but few truly understand: Israel. For decades, Tel Aviv has maintained what diplomats politely call nuclear ambiguity. The world knows, the experts know, and every intelligence agency worth its salt knows Israel has nuclear weapons. But it's never admitted it, never denied it. It's a dance of silence that began back in the 1960s with the Dimona reactor deep in the Negev desert, the official line. Strategic deterrence, the reality, nuclear monopoly. Israel's undeclared arsenal, estimated between 80 and 200 warheads, has given it a silent but absolute edge. For years, it has shaped not only military strategy but political reality in the Middle East. Nations could protest, they could resist, they could even attack, but they could not threaten Israel's existence, not without risking annihilation. It was the ultimate insurance policy. But here's the problems. Insurance policies expire when others buy their own. And that's exactly what Iran is doing. In laboratories and underground halls beneath the mountains of Natanz and Fordo, centrifuges are spinning faster, Lauger. The West says Iran is weeks away from enough enriched uranium for a bomb. Tehran says it's all for peaceful energy. But nobody's fooled anymore, not even Iran's allies. Since the US withdrew from the nuclear deal in 2018, the Iranian program has moved from cautious defiance to open acceleration. Enrichment levels, once capped at 3.67%, are now soaring beyond 60%. And the scientists behind the program, many trained abroad, many now under sanctions, are working in near total secrecy. You can hear the alarm bells from Tel Aviv to Washington. But there's another capital now paying close attention: Riyadh. Because if Iran goes nuclear, Saudi Arabia won't be far behind. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has said it openly, almost casually: if Iran develops a nuclear bomb, we will follow suit as soon as possible. Those aren't the words of diplomacy. Those are the words of inevitability. And that's where the story turns dangerous. Because what we're seeing now isn't just a nuclear race, it's a triangle of distrust. Each side claims to want peace. Each side swears their actions are defensive. And yet, each side's defense is the other's provocation. Iran says it needs nuclear capability to deter Israel. Israel says it must strike to stop Iran. And Saudi Arabia, it says it must balance both, but with power of its own. In the middle of that balance lies the fuse. The Americans, of course, are watching nervously. The Biden administration, after years of trying to resurrect the nuclear deal, is now facing a reality it never wanted to admit. The Middle East is slipping beyond Washington's control, because while US diplomats negotiate, China and Russia are arming and aligning. Beijing brokered the Iran-Saudi rapprochement in 2023, a stunning move that shifted diplomatic gravity eastward. Suddenly, the traditional enemies were shaking hands not out of love, but out of strategy. And that handshake, it sent chills through Washington and Tel Aviv alike, because the Saudis, America's longtime oil ally, were signaling something extraordinary. They were no longer willing to be pawns. They wanted to be players. And in the game of global power, you can't stay a player forever without the ultimate weapon. Now, imagine this for a moment. It's the year 2028. Iran announces it has successfully completed uranium enrichment for peaceful research. But buried in the phrasing is the truth: it has the bomb. Israel's cabinet meets in emergency session. The Mossad chief warns that a nuclear-armed Iran could empower Hezbollah, embolden Hamas, and change the balance of deterrence forever. And then, in Riyadh, MBS receives a late night call from his defense minister. The call is short, simple, chilling. Your Highness, Iran has crossed the line. Within months, Saudi scientists, with Pakistani technical assistance and Chinese material backing, unveil their own nuclear research center deep in the desert, far from prying satellites. 3 nuclear powers, 1 region, no trust. That's the nightmare scenario analysts are whispering about. But what's terrifying is how plausible it's become. Because unlike the Cold War triangle of the US, USSR, and China, this new nuclear triangle lacks one crucial ingredient: communication. Back then, red phones connected Washington to Moscow. Diplomats met, treaties were signed, and doctrine was clear: mutually assured destruction. Today, there are no red phones between Tehran, Riyadh, and Jerusalem. Only silence and suspicion. And in that silence, the smallest miscalculation could ignite the largest catastrophe. A drone strike misattributed. A cyber attack misunderstood. A missile test mistaken for a launch. That's how nuclear wars begin, not with a plan, but with a mistake. But before we dive deeper into that chilling future, let's rewind to how we got here. Because none of this happened overnight. When the Shah ruled Iran, he was America's man in the region, and he wanted nuclear power. Washington said yes. In fact, it helped him. The irony is that the same reactors America supported in the 1970s laid the groundwork for what the Ayatollahs now control. Then came the revolution, the hostage crisis, the sanctions. Iran went from ally to adversary overnight, and its nuclear dreams driven underground, literally. Meanwhile, Israel doubled down on its secret arsenal. It refused inspections, refused transparency, and refused to sign the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Why? Because ambiguity worked, fear worked, deterrence worked, and Saudi Arabia. It stayed quiet, buying security with oil and dollars, until the day it realized neither oil nor dollars can stop an Iranian bomb. Now, let's look at the power structure behind this new triangle. Israel has capability, Iran has ambition, Saudi Arabia has money. And when those 3 elements, capability, ambition, and money, start orbiting each other, history tells us only one thing: someone's going to build something explosive. Saudi Arabia has already invested billions in civilian nuclear technology. Officially, it's about energy diversification. But unofficially, every major analyst knows civilian programs can pivot to military ones in months if the infrastructure is right. And the infrastructure is right. The US has quietly allowed the Saudis to import uranium and develop limited enrichment capacity. China, meanwhile, has been helping them build ballistic missile factories. In essence, Riyadh is collecting puzzle pieces, and the picture they form isn't about electricity, it's about power. But here's the twist: Israel might help Saudi Arabia to stop Iran. Sounds absurd, maybe not. Behind closed doors, Israeli and Saudi intelligence officials have met repeatedly in recent years. Their shared hatred of Iran has created a strange, almost surreal cooperation, one that Washington encourages but rarely admits. Some analysts believe that if Iran crosses the nuclear threshold, Israel might even share technology or intelligence with Riyadh under the table to maintain regional stability. Yes, the same Israel that bombed Iraq's nuclear reactor in 1981 and Syria's in 2007 could one day help another Arab nation go nuclear. That's the level of distortion, the level of desperation, the level of danger we've reached. And then there's Iran's perspective, the one rarely heard in Western media. From Tehran's point of view, it's they who are surrounded. To their west, Israel, with undeclared nukes. To their South American bases in the Gulf. To their east, Pakistan, a sunny nuclear state. For Iran's hardliners, the lesson of history is brutal regimes without nuclear deterrence fall. Saddam fell. Gaddafi fell. So they ask, why shouldn't Iran have what Israel does? That's not paranoia. That's strategy. And it's why no amount of sanctions, threats, or diplomacy has truly stopped the Iranian program. Because for nuclear power isn't about prestige anymore. It's about survival. But what happens when all three sides believe they're acting in self-defense? That's when deterrence turns into delusion. Because each believes the other will blink first. Each thinks its weapons will prevent war. And history, from Hiroshima to Pyongyang, tells us otherwise. As of 2025, US intelligence estimates Iran could produce enough weapons, grade uranium, in under 12 days. Israeli analysts claim it's already done so. Saudi officials, meanwhile, are hinting, not denying, that they're prepared for all scenarios. Prepared for all scenarios. The language of war disguised as the language of diplomacy. And yet, amid all this tension, a strange calm prevails. Markets haven't crashed. Oil prices remain stable. World leaders shake hands at summits, pretending it's all under control. But behind that calm lies a quiet understanding that the next great global crisis won't begin in Moscow or Beijing. It'll begin in the deserts between the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf. And when it does, the world won't have weeks to react. It will have minutes. Because nuclear weapons in the hands of nations with active proxy wars, cyber arsenals, and deep sectarian divides is not just dangerous, it's unthinkable. And yet, it's happening. The truth is, the Middle East's nuclear shadow isn't about weapons alone. It's about trust, or the lack of it. Trust is what allowed the US and the Soviet Union to step back from the brink. Trust is what allowed India and Pakistan to stabilize after 1998. And trust is exactly what the Middle East does not have. Instead, it has rage. It has memory. It has faith, weaponized and politicized. In Tehran, the narrative is resistance against Zionism and Western imperialism. In Riyadh, it's leadership of the Islamic world. In Tel Aviv, it's survival, a doctrine born of centuries of persecution, 3 visions, 3 traumas, 3 buttons, all pointing at each other. And so, as the world watches, the Middle East begins to shift from a battlefield of ideology to a chessboard of nuclear brinkmanship. Each move now carries global consequences. Each statement is analyzed by satellites, each silence by spies. And somewhere in the quiet corridors of power, plans are being drawn. Contingency plans, preemptive plans, strike plans. Because if diplomacy fails, and it's failing, the next decision won't be made at a conference table. It'll be made in the dark, inside a war room, by men who believe history has chosen them for a moment that cannot be postponed. And when that moment comes, who will blink first? Because history doesn't repeat itself, it evolves. And what's unfolding now feels like the Cuban Missile Crisis stretched across deserts and decades, played not by superpowers with hotlines, but by rivals who share no language, no history of restraint, and no fear of crossing red lines. In Tel Aviv, military planners study satellite imagery every morning, looking for changes in Iran's underground complexes. A fresh road here, a new heat signature there, a longer shadow at dawn, the signs that something has shifted. The fear isn't just of what Iran builds, but of what it hides. In Tehran, generals speak in coded language. Deterrence through dignity, they call it. They watch Israeli politicians talk of preemptive strikes and remind their people that the era of humiliation is over. On state television, images of Natanz and Fordo flash beneath banners declaring scientific glory, the weaponization of nationalism through nuclear pride. And in Riyadh, the vision is cloaked in silence. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's inner circle doesn't boast. They plan, they buy, they build. Their nuclear cooperation with China stays officially civilian. but every part of it is dual-use technology that could be flipped with a decision, a decree, a single night's command. Behind the scenes, diplomats whisper that Saudi Arabia's deal with the US for civilian nuclear power comes with a clause no one dares to mention publicly: the right to enrich. It's not a bomb yet, but it's the doorway to one. And once the door opens, it never closes again. Meanwhile, Israel's silence is cracking. Within the Knesset, debates grow louder. Should the policy of nuclear ambiguity continue in a world where Iran and Saudi Arabia both approach parity? Or should Israel come clean, admit what everyone knows, to reassert its deterrence openly? The dilemma cuts deep. Secrecy has protected Israel for 60 years. But in an age of leaks, transparency might be the only deterrence left. And America, it watches, stretched thin between Ukraine, Taiwan, and the Middle East. The Pentagon's analysts write reports about strategic instability. But even the term sounds academic, sterile, compared to the reality on the ground. The US can no longer dictate. It can only advise. It warns Israel to show restraint, urges Iran to comply, tempts Saudi Arabia with defense pacts. But all three are acting on their own timelines now. The balance that once defined the region has evaporated. It's replaced by a race, quiet, invisible, but deadly. And as that race accelerates, so does the paranoia. Cyber warfare between the three powers has already intensified. Iran's Revolutionary Guards hack Israeli infrastructure. Israeli spyware infiltrates Tehran's defense networks. Saudi servers light up with phantom signals traced to both. It's no longer about bombs alone. It's about who can blind, disrupt, or mislead the other before the first strike. That's the most dangerous phase of all, when fear becomes the weapon, because in such a moment, a single false alarm can be fatal. A radar blip mistaken for a missile, a test launch misread as an attack, one trigger pulled in confusion, and the entire triangle collapses into chaos. And yet, despite it all, no one steps back. Every side believes they're the rational one, the restrained one, the defender of order. They speak of peace while preparing for war, of faith while building fire. The irony, of course, is that each secretly hopes the other will go nuclear because that just justifies their own ambitions. It's the perfect circle of justification, and it's tightening. Somewhere tonight, deep inside a control room in Dimona, red lights blink quietly. Somewhere in Qum, scientists examine enriched samples, whispering calculations that could change the world. And somewhere near Riyadh, a new underground facility takes shape, its purpose officially experimental, its future anything but. 3 nations, 3 shadows, 1 sky. And in that sky hangs a silence so heavy, so precarious, that the world pretends not to notice, because to notice would mean to admit how close we truly are. How close the triangle has come to closing. How close the storm is to breaking. And so, as the desert winds move across the ancient lands of Persia, Arabia, and Israel, a new kind of storm gathers, not of dust or fire, but of fear. For the first time in modern history, the Middle East's greatest rivals all stand within reach of the most devastating power humanity has ever created. Each claims it's for defense. Each insists it's for peace. But history teaches us that peace built on fear is peace built on sand. The world has seen nuclear triangles before, Washington, Moscow, Beijing, but this one is different. This one burns with religion, rivalry, and revenge. It has no treaties, no red phones, no trust. Only the ticking sound of centrifuges and the silence of leaders who believe they can control the uncontrollable. And perhaps that's the true danger. Not the bomb itself, but the belief that it can be managed, that men can contain the very thing they were warned never to unleash. In the end, the new nuclear triangle isn't just a story about weapons. It's a mirror, reflecting humanity's oldest weakness, the hunger for power, even when it comes at the cost of survival. Because the next war in the Middle East may not begin with an invasion. It may begin with a flash. And when that light fades, it won't matter who was right, only who's left.